Recording in progress.
Ambassador, you may need to unmute
Yes,
yourself.
sir, because actually I was muted, so here I am. Good morning, everyone. It's an honor to be among all these distinguished guests today, Rotarians, and I think maybe non-Rotarians as well. Um, I was a Rotarian myself, and I still believe very much in Rotary as an institution and as principles, and I still follow the Rotary teaching, even if I'm not a member anymore or an active member anymore. Um, Today, we are going to talk about something that I wish to discuss with you because I think it's quite interesting for us to discuss what we call the US peace proposal. Is it really a promise or just a mirage? And this is the title I chose for what I'm going to talk today. So, first of all, thank you all for being here today as we attempt to analyze a question that is not only political, not only humanitarian, but profoundly moral. Is the newly adopted US sponsored peace plan, now formalized as the United Nations Security Council Resolution 2803, a genuine promise of peace or merely another mirage in a long desert of unfitting commitments? Today, I argue firmly, logically, and without ambiguity that unless the international community enforces the right of the Palestinian people to an independent sovereign state within recognized borders, this resolution, like many before it, will lead us nowhere. Not to peace, not to justice, and most importantly, not even to stability. Just a cycle of illusions, violence, and despair. This resolution, we have to remember some points regarding this resolution. It's quite important, actually. The resolution adopted and correctly adopted, but it was never negotiated. Let's begin with a certain undeniable reality. The Security Council has adopted Resolution 2803. Yes, it has the weight of international legitimacy. Yes, it passed with an overwhelming support from all the countries around the world, except with abstention from two other superpowers, mainly China and the Russian Federation. But in what word can a resolution be called a peace initiative when the very people whose lives it determines were not even consulted? The Palestinian, I'm not talking here about the resistant movements or the other political factions, but not even the Palestinian Authority were giving any input. The resolution was drafted entirely by the United States and Israel. I believe that this is not diplomacy, not mediation, this is imposition. If the path to peace begins with excluding the occupied people from the table, then let us be honest. We are not walking toward peace. We are marching towards another disaster. I think that the US-Israel axis, not support, but is in full complicity. There is a painful truth that must be said clearly. Israel could not have carried out decades of occupation, settlement expansions, annexation, and devastating military operations without the full complicity of the United States of America. This is not a passive approval. This is not a quiet acceptance, but active, sustained strategic complicity. Complicity in arming, complicity in shielding violations from accountability, complicity in using veto power to bury resolutions that demand an end to an occupation, complicity even in rewriting the narrative so that the oppressed become the aggressors and the occupier become the victim. This new resolution is simply another extension of what we have seen earlier. We have a certain illusion that was mentioned in the resolution 2803, and I think it's quite important, which is the illusion of the statehood of the Palestinian. Many have pointed to one line in the resolution, a line that speaks vaguely of a pathway of a Palestinian statehood. Ladies and gentlemen, a pathway without a destination is not a road. Let us examine the facts. The resolution provides no timetable, no schedule, no phases, no even binding commitments, no consequences if Israel refuses to comply, and no enforcement mechanism, if any, of any kind. In another word, statehood is mentioned but never guaranteed. It is presented as a possibility, but tethered to conditions, delays, and obstacles. It is not a political ornament, not a legal obligation. This is not a promise. It's a rhetorical gesture, a gesture designed to pacify international opinion, not to end seriously an occupation. And allow me to look a little bit deeper to the resolution 2803, a resolution that I consider a symmetry where there is obligations for Palestinians and total impunity for Israel. It contains strict, imperative, binding obligations imposed almost inclusively on one side, the Palestinian, specifically Hamas and all Palestinian resistant movements must disarm immediately, completely, and permanently. No matter what one thinks of Hamas, the issue here is not about ideology. It is about balance, about justice. It is about absurdity of demanding demilitarization from an occupied population while imposing no obligations on the occupying power. Because what about Israel? What must it do under this resolution? Does it have to stop settlement expansion? No. Halt even annexation? No. And its occupation? No. Accept the Palestinian sovereignty? No. Not even one important element, which is to define its borders. Israel never defined its borders. Actually, this is a peace plan where only the occupied people must surrender while the occupier changes nothing. Thus, from an Israeli point of view, the resolution seems to me as a strategic jackpot, a win-win scenario. How is that? Uh, I mean, if Hamas agrees to disarm, Israel achieves what many of its hardline leaders have openly sought for years, the ability to empty Palestine under the pretext of security. It's, in another word, a second Nakba, disguised in diplomatic language. And if Hamas refuses to disarm, as any occupied people would do, Israel gains the perfect justification for a new war, a bigger war, a total war, and in the name of fighting terrorism as usual. Either way, Palestinians lose, their rights are erased, their territory shrinks, their leadership is delegitimized, their suffering is mischaracterized, their political future is totally buried. Now, I think it's very important if we talk for a little bit about the elephant in the room. This is an American expression that I love very much. The elephant in the room is the occupation, the humiliation, the denied dignity for the Palestinian people. Israel frames every attack as self-defense against Syria while occupying the Golan Heights, against Lebanon while violating its airspace daily, against Palestine while expanding illegal settlements in the West Bank. But there is an elephant in the room that no political resolution can hide. It's the occupation. Occupation creates resistance. Oppression generates unrest. Humiliation breeds anger. And anger, in vocabulary of the powerful, is renamed terrorism. The vicious circle continues because the root cause is untouched. And what is that root cause? A stateless people denied their humanity for 76 years. And not just that, even with the Trump plan that is now a UN resolution, Israel denies totally the possibility of looking into a Palestinian state. And let's look at Israel here, the Israel strategic ambiguity. No state on earth has insisted for nearly 8 decades on refusing to declare officially its borders, except one. It's Israel. Know why? Because declaring borders would mean limiting expansion. It would mean no more annexation, of Syrian lands or Lebanese lands. No more encroaching on Lebanese territory. No more devouring Palestinian land piece by piece. A state that does not define its borders cannot claim to respect those of others. A state committed to perpetual expansion cannot produce peace. A state built on taking land cannot also negotiate in good faith. Is peace impossible without justice? Peace is not the absence of war, as we learned in Rotary. Peace is the presence of justice. And justice begins always with ending occupation, restoring dignity, returning land that has been taken by force, upholding the international law, guaranteeing sovereignty, and ensuring equality. And above all, and above all, the respect of the other Palestinian people. And I think this we haven't seen before. And this, I think, is the worst part of what we are talking about. So now let's talk about the last point, if I may. Um, well, Israel still, here I need to draw a certain parallel, if you don't mind. The parallel with other occupation, the double standard, I call it. Outrage for some, while silence for others. Let me address that million in the Middle East. See clearly. I'm sorry, excuse me for just a minute, because something disappeared. Just a second. Yes. That people in the Middle East see clearly, and what people in the West increasingly recognize, the breathtaking double standard in global reactions to different conflicts. If I may remind you, Russia invaded Ukraine. Within days, and I mean days, the West froze Russian assets, seized private properties of even Russians who are not involved in war, banned Russia from FIFA, the football organization, and UEFA, banned Russia from the Olympics, cut off Russian energy, suspended Russia from Eurovision even, the music competition, and imposed sweeping sanction. Actually, we are now applying the 18th packet of sanctions against Russia. Now let's look at Israel. Israel bombed Gaza for months, leveling neighborhoods, hospitals, schools, killing tens of thousands. And what happened? Israel still competes in the Olympic, still participates in FIFA, still appears in Eurovision, to the point that some European countries have withdrawn their participation from this competition. And most importantly, Israel still receives weapons, still receives billions of dollars in aid, still receives diplomatic protection. Two wars, two occupations, and also two standards. This is what Palestinian and Arab cannot ignore. And beyond the moral inconsistency lies a legal one. Israel remained the only UN member state in modern history to violate more than 30 binding Security Council resolutions, including Resolution 242, 338, and 2334, all of which condemn settlement activity without a single enforcement mechanism applied. No other conflict on earth has been permitted to defy international law for this long without consequence. But of course, Israel is enjoying a full American coverage and a full American protection. That's what enables it to continue. Finally, how do Palestinians would feel when they watch their resistance accused of violating the peace agreement over one body left that they couldn't retrieve because Israeli bombardment made excavation impossible? And this is the alibi of Israel right now, that Hamas is not complying with the resolution of the United Nations. While no one mentions The 400 Palestinians, mostly women and children, killed by Israel since the Sharm el-Sheikh agreement, even before the resolution, ever since we signed this agreement by Mr. Trump himself. One body is treated as a catastrophe. 400 bodies are merely treated as statistics. This is not diplomacy. This is not justice. This is a selective morality, the most dangerous form of injustice. Once again, occupation is the root. Resistance is the symptom. Peace will never come from demanding silence from the oppressed while leaving the oppression in place. Occupation creates resistance. Humiliation breeds anger. Dispossession fuels unrest. If the world wants peace, real peace, it must address the cause, not the symptom. And once again, a state without borders cannot be partner for peace. No modern country refuses to define its border except one, Israel. And we all know why. Because ambiguity allows expansion. Expansion prevents peace. A state that does not define its borders cannot commit to respecting those of others. Do we want really to solve the conflict of the Middle East, or we are just looking at another way of managing this conflict? The international community now faces a decisive choice. Either continue the cycle of illusions and violence, or finally address the conflict with honesty, courage, and equality. Real peace demands a sovereign Palestinian state on 1967 borders with East Jerusalem as its capital, a binding internationally supervised timeline, and importantly, and most importantly, consequences for violation for all sides, especially the stronger side. Without this, Resolution 2803 will join the long list of failed initiatives. And let us be honest about how we got here. From the mass displacement of 1948, known to us as the Nakba, to the occupation of 1967, to the unfulfilled promise in Oslo in 93, to the cycles of escalation that followed, this conflict persists not because peace is impossible, but because settlement expansion increased from 200,000 settlers in 1993 to nearly 800,000 today, erasing the geographic basis for a viable Palestinian state. And this matters because only one country has the leverage to reverse it, the United States of America. The US provides 73 of Israel military imports, billions in annual aid, and most importantly, unparalleled diplomatic protection. And history proves this truth. Israel has only made territorial concessions when Washington applied real pressure, including the Sinai withdrawal, the Sinai of Egypt withdrawal in 1982, the Oslo breakthrough in 1993, and the Gaza disengagement in 2005. No other actor in the world possesses this influence. Yes, allow me at the end to say the following. Despite all these grim realities, let me be clear. Peace is not impossible. It is simply unfinished. A credible roadmap exists, one that the Arab world itself proposed, which is called the Arab Peace Initiative, launched by the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and unanimously adopted by the Arab League, and offers the most comprehensive framework for real peace, full normalization and regional integration in exchange for a full withdrawal and creating an independent Palestinian state. But for this vision to move from principle to practice, it requires something decisive, full, forceful, and sustained US involvement. Israel has never complied with any major political concession without an American pressure and without a US administration committing to enforcing the land for peace principle, backed by a unified Western conviction that international law applies to everyone equally. Nothing meaningfully will change. But if Washington chooses courage over caution, if it finally matches its word with leverage, and if the world stands behind a rules-based and dignity-based solution, then the Arab Peace Initiative can at last be implemented. And the international law also can finally be happy because of this implementation. And in that moment, the Middle East can begin a new chapter, one where peace is not spoken of in future tense, but lived by millions in the present, by Palestinian and by Israelis as well. Thank you very much.